Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here with us today. I'm Attorney General General Schneiderman, and I'm very proud to be here today and to be joined by some of New York's leading advocates for a more fair, a more effective, and a more transparent government. Activists, many of whom I've worked with for years in reform efforts, including Susan Lerner of Common Cause New York, Dick Dady of Citizens Union, Jonathan Weston of New York Communities for Change, Darius Gordon from Citizen Action of New York, Ian Vanderwalker, a counsel at the Brennan Center for Justice, Sally Robinson of the New York League of Women Voters, Dominic Morrow with Reinvent Albany, and Emmanuel Caicedo, who is a campaign strategist at Demos. And we're here with other activists from these organizations and quite a few of our friends from Make the Road New York and New York Communities for Change. Thank you all for being here with us today. So we're here standing on the steps of the Tweed Courthouse, which to many New Yorkers represents corruption in government. But this courthouse also reminds us of New York's great tradition of reform movements and of the willingness of New Yorkers to fight back year in, year out, decade in and decade out against corruption.
That's right.
With the help of muckraking journalists and the great cartoonist Thomas Nass, the people of New York rose up against Boss Tweed, and he was convicted of more than 200 counts of corruption in this very courthouse before it was actually finished. His conviction helped raise public awareness of the need for a reform movement, and reform movements evolved and fought Tammany Hall for decades after Tweed's demise. So, ladies and gentlemen, we know that corruption in New York State is nothing new, but even in our state's long history, this year's events stand out. To be clear, I do not believe that corruption is worse now than it's ever been, but more of it is now being exposed, both by prosecutors and by journalists, and I'm proud to say by the Office of the New York State Attorney General. And while the overwhelming majority of legislators and government servants are good actors who want to do good for the people, ladies and gentlemen, with the leaders of both houses of the legislature charged with corruption in a single session, the need for reform right now is shockingly clear. On May 13th, the governor and the new legislative leaders met to discuss their priorities for the end of the legislative session. Amazingly, ethics reform and campaign finance reform did not even make the cut. They did not make it onto the list of end of session priorities. They are not on Albany's agenda. Well, we are here to say that they must be put back on the agenda, and to the people of the state of New York, they are the agenda.
That's right. Right. Yeah.
So it's important to understand this goes far beyond the activist community. This goes far beyond good government groups. A new poll this week shows that more than 90% of regular New Yorkers think that corruption is a serious problem. Corruption takes our government out of the hands of the people of our great state and puts it in the pockets of those who can write the biggest checks. It also taints the work of the many honorable public servants trying to do their jobs and trying to do good for the people of the state of New York. The pattern by now is very familiar, ladies and gentlemen, and it's a pattern we are seeking to break today. The familiar cycle is scandal, followed by outrage, followed by prosecution, then reforms that tinker but do not solve the problem, followed by another scandal, another round of reforms at the margins. Well, that is clearly not good enough. It's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for the advocates standing with me, and it's damn sure not good enough for the people of the state of New York.
That's right.
So today, I have introduced and we are proposing the End New York Corruption Now Act, a comprehensive ethics package that reformers, good government groups, activists, and the people of New York State demand. The reform legislation we are introducing today has three main goals. First, to end the pernicious effect of outside money in both politics and government. Second, to ensure that every act of corruption is met with a swift, serious response. And finally, to encourage more honorable people to pursue public service. No one can say the proposals in this legislation are radical or partisan. Many of these proposals have been advanced and examined for years, and many of them have been introduced in bills by members of the Senate and the Assembly. In fact, some of the reforms that are incorporated into this comprehensive reform bill have been passed in the Assembly year after year. The problem is we have to move past one House bills, and we have to get comprehensive reform enacted now. My point is simple. The legislature has all of the time and the information they need to make all of the changes proposed in this bill before the end of this year's session. This bill is more comprehensive, its reforms are more fundamental, but it addresses issues that we are all familiar with. So here in outline is what I'm proposing today. This reform legislation will end all outside earned income for lawmakers, ban per diem payments, and dramatically tighten campaign contribution limits. If you work for the people of New York, the people of New York should be your only clients. In turn, legislators should be paid like the full-time professionals they are. I propose a substantial pay increase, which would be the first salary increase since 1998.
Yes. Yes. That's great.
And let's extend legislative terms from 2 years to 4. This will give lawmakers time to focus on governing instead of politics, and will also add to the fact that it's easier to supervise and monitor campaigns. It's easier for the watchdogs to do their work in a 4-year cycle. We will also cut down on Albany's pay-to-play culture by dramatically lowering New York's political contribution limits, currently among the highest in the nation. And we will further limit, even beyond the regular limits we're imposing, any contributions from lobbyists or those who do business with the state. We have rules like this in New York City. There's no reason we can't do the same in Albany.
That's right.
Speaking of New York City has already demonstrated that a voluntary public financing system can work. Robust public financing for state elections would allow good politicians to get off the fundraising hamster wheel, and it will enable more good, honest people of modest means to seek public office. Now, of course, even with these reforms, not every elected official will always follow the law, which is why politicians who break the law must see swift and serious consequences. We can strengthen enforcement by giving the Office of the Attorney General the clear authority to directly investigate public corruption. I am proud of the fact that over the past 4 years, in an innovative partnership with Comptroller Tom DiNapoli, my office has prosecuted more than 70 corrupt officials and their cronies all across the state. But the state's top law enforcement agencies should have the right and responsibility to root out public corruption anywhere on its own. Thank you. Our reform legislation also expands the tools available to state prosecutors, all state prosecutors, to investigate and prosecute corruption. This legislation includes stricter laws around self-dealing, bribery, and pension forfeiture, which will help stop some of Albany's most egregious abuses. My friends, at the end, thank you. Let's hear it for egregious abuses. My friends, at the end of the day, there are only two paths forward. More scandals, more prosecutions, and the further erosion of public confidence, or real transformational reform that will prevent corruption in the first place. Many of us standing up here today have been fighting for decades to clean up Albany. Some of us have gotten very gray in this process. But I do believe that this year we are now in a unique position, a unique moment when comprehensive reform is not just possible, but it is being demanded by average New Yorkers all across the state, people who never thought about campaign finance laws or ethics laws until recently. They are demanding change, and change can come and must come this session. As we stand before Boss Tweed's courthouse, let us remember how New Yorkers of an earlier generation took him down and launched reform movements. Bold change, real change, comprehensive transformational change is possible, and the time for half measures is over. The bill we are announcing today is an example of what truly comprehensive reform looks like. This is a time for reformers, both in and out of government, to raise their voices. Let's get this done. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Anytime.
Y ahora, I want to say a few words in Spanish. La corrupción es una epidemia en Nueva York. Estoy proponiendo una ley para atacar la raíz de la corrupción. Prohibir los ingresos de fuera, aumentar el castigo por soborno, prohibir los pagos de viáticos y un nuevo sistema de financiar campañas. Nueva York merece un gobierno libre de corrupción.
Así es.
And now I'm proud to introduce a leader in the cause who is youthful as ever, who has watched me go gray, Susan Lerner, the director of Common Cause.
Thank you very much. I am here from Common Cause New York to commend Attorney General Schneiderman for stepping up where others have ducked. New Yorkers are tired of having their elected leaders led away in handcuffs, indicted by the U.S. Attorney, and being the butt of late-night jokes. Yet the legislature and the governor have failed to address the situation. The bill that the Attorney General is proposing addresses the crisis in corruption head-on. The AG's Omnibus Anti-Corruption and Ethics Reform Bill is aptly named. It's the sweeping and bold reform we've been waiting for. It follows but improves on the roadmap provided by the Moreland Commission. Its important common sense provisions are ones which Common Cause New York endorses wholeheartedly, strengthening our laws relating to bribery and self-dealing, getting to one of the roots of corruption by forthrightly seeking to ban outside income, making the legislature full-time, and increasing their pay commensurately, and tackling the other most important corrupting factor, the money that is sloshing around in our political system, really facing it head-on, lowering contribution limits, extending the terms to 4 years, closing the LLC loophole, dealing with the big problem in housekeeping accounts, and most important of all, seeking to create a system of small donor matching funds for election campaigns that's fully funded by a dedicated funding source. So we urge the legislature and the governor to follow the AG's example. Don't just leave this as a stake in the ground. Let's see this legislation move forward. Let's see it signed into law this year. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General.
Thank you. ¿Por qué no? And now another friend and ally in the struggle, Dick Dady of Citizens Union, who hosted me to give a speech at the beginning of March, setting out the same parameters for what we hoped would be legislative action. As the action has not been forthcoming, we have now put the terms of that speech into the bill, but this all really, we owe a debt of gratitude to the folks at Citizens Union and to my friend, Dick Dady.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. My name is Dick Dady, the Executive Director of Citizens Union, an organization that was born out of the corruption here at the Tweed Courthouse in the late 1890s. And we have been fighting against corruption and for the public interest for over a century. I want you to remember one important number, 33. With the indictment and the arrest of former Senate Majority Leader Dean Skelos, he became the 33rd state legislator in our state in the past 15 years to be charged with corruption or misconduct. There are 29 legislators in that period of time that have been forced from office because of misconduct or corruption. When former Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver in January was charged with violating the public trust, there was a response out of our elected officials in Albany that was another bite at the apple. We increased the transparency of outside entanglements, of outside income of all state lawmakers. It was just another step forward in this long fight that has been intensified over the past years, where we have seen significant steps forward, but they have not been enough. We have a major problem in Albany. Money is corrupting our political system.
That's true.
Whether it's money in the form of campaign contribution, whether it's money in the form of outside income, it all boils down to money.
That's right.
Until we get at the heart of the conflict of interest that exists in our government, where there is self-dealing by our elected officials, whether it's the legalized extortion that takes place in the form of campaign contributions, or the pay-to-play culture where legislators are hired because of their connections to outside government, we will not be able to address this serious problem of corruption in Albany. After Dean Skelos was arrested several weeks ago, what was the response of our elected officials in Albany? Silence. It was outrageous that no one spoke out and proposed any new set of reforms. Into this silence, into this void, we now have Attorney General Eric Schneiderman coming forward with a bold set of comprehensive reforms that are so necessary, so needed, and we thank him for his courageous leadership today in trying to end this culture of corruption in Albany. Not only do we need change, not only do we need reform, we need to transform Albany. These proposals being put forward today will do that. And that is the kind of bold political leadership we need from our state government. And we are so happy that Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has stepped forward with this bold, comprehensive set that will introduce comprehensive campaign finance reform, that will introduce public funding, that will limit the money that legislators can earn, that will lift up their salaries, that will remove the conflicts of interest that have been such a part of the corrupting influence of Albany. We thank him and we congratulate him, and we look forward to working with him.
That's right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you. And I thank all of you for being here. Believe me, I have been here with you before I was in elective office. I expect to be campaigning for good causes after I'm in elective office. So I thank you for your support, but no one does this alone. We do this together or we don't get it done at all. So let's be sure we all take responsibility for our parts, and that's a perfect way to introduce someone who organizes collectively for the common good every day of his life, New York Communities for Change, Jonathan Weston.
It's good to be here today. Thank you, Attorney General Schneiderman, for your leadership on this. Right now in Albany and around New York State, we're in a state of paralysis. We're in a state of paralysis where nothing is getting done, and nothing is getting done because of the corruption in New York State.
That's right.
Right now, millions of workers, millions of low-wage workers across New York State are not going to be able to realize an increase in this state's minimum wage, one of the highest costs of living in this country. We will not be able to increase the minimum wage in New York State. Right now, 3 million tenants are in danger of losing their homes, are in danger of being pushed out of rent-regulated buildings all across New York. The reason this is happening is because of corruption in New York State. Millions of homeowners across New York State are being saddled with huge property tax burdens, while at the same time we are giving tax breaks to $100 million apartments. The only answer to that is corruption. corruption continues to hold this state back. The billionaires that are controlling Albany, that are controlling New York, are leaving families, are leaving workers, are leaving tenants behind. We are glad to join in the Attorney General's call to clean up New York State, to clean up Albany, to make this state a state that works for working families and tenants and homeowners and workers. That's why we are glad to join this campaign and kick off this campaign with the Attorney General and join in his leadership to clean up Albany, to clean up New York, and we will continue pushing, continue fighting. Thank you.
Chantel, want to sit on? Chantel, want to sit on here? Yeah. Okay.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes, we can. My church.
And ladies and gentlemen, just to bring this down to reality and reinforce who we're talking about and who we're fighting for, we have a couple of special guests who are going to be here today to share some of their thoughts about the need for change, the need for reform. First, someone I know well and has joined me in fighting for justice quite a few times, Chantel Walker, a worker at Papa John's.
Thank you for the warm welcome.
Hello, Chantel. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Right. My name is Chantel Walker. I know firsthand the obstacles of working families face when it comes to making our voices heard in Albany. Yes. I worked at Papa John's in Bushwick, earning $8.50 an hour and barely enough to survive. Every year, people like me go to Albany and fight for policies that will give us a better chance to provide for our families and a better life. But unlike a lot of people up there, we can't write big checks. We can't fill our campaign bank accounts. In fact, we don't have anything to offer elected officials other than true stories of our hardships that confront every family trying to get by on a wage that is keeping us below the poverty level line. That should be enough, right? That should be enough, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. It should be enough to have facts on your side to support and the support of your fellow New Yorkers. But sadly, it's not. Even though 70% of New Yorkers support raising the minimum wage, it is a struggle to get lawmakers to act. But I'm not giving up hope. I'm here today because Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has a plan to change that. He has a plan to reform the way business gets things done in the Capitol and bring the power back to the people.
Yes.
I said bring the power back to the people. I said bring the power back to the people. People like me.
Yes.
We all are here today because Attorney General Eric Schneiderman has a plan to change a system that prevents our voices from being heard.
That's right.
I have experienced firsthand the power of Attorney General Eric Schneiderman's commitment to working people. He has helped thousands of working people like me ensure that they get fairly treated by their employees. Employers.
That's a fact.
As employees, we want rights too in the workplace.
Yes.
And I know that by fighting for us in Albany, he will do everything in his power to make sure our voices will be heard in the state lawmakers' chambers.
And people will go to jail. Yes. Bring him out to that.
He has made a plan to give our system the reform it needs and the reform voters demand.
That's right.
That's why I'm so glad to be here today speaking on behalf of working people across the city, and I'm asking lawmakers to pass the Attorney General's reforms rights right away. We can't afford to wait any longer. Thank you.
Pronto.
Thank you.
Pronto. Pass the
Antel,
bills.
Antel.
Pass the bills. Pass the bills. Pass the bills.
Pass the bills.
Pass the bills. Pass the bills. Pass the bills.
Pass the bills. All right. And now another special guest. Esteban? Esteban Heron is a tenant activist who's now going to share his thoughts with us today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Esteban Heron. I'm a member of the Crown Heights Tenant Union. Thank you for being here, and a special thank you to Attorney General Eric Schneiderman for giving us the opportunity to speak to this important issue. Every day, as a tenant and organizer in my community, I fight an uphill battle to win policies that recognize the needs of 2.5 million New Yorkers who live in rent-regulated housing. Nowhere is that battle more apparent than in our current fight to strengthen the rent regulation laws. The loopholes in the rent laws have contributed to a loss of affordability in my neighborhood, which in turn has resulted in an increase in evictions and homelessness. Predatory landlords buy up buildings at exorbitant prices, knowing how easy it is to manipulate the regulations that are meant to protect the most vulnerable New Yorkers. They are destroying the diversity of our neighborhoods and making New York City a place that only the wealthy can enjoy.
That's not right.
This is a crisis. But this crisis did not happen by accident. Perverse incentives like deregulation, preferential rents, individual apartment increases, and vacancy bonuses, they're all a product of systematic weakening of the rent laws. They're a product of developers like Glenwood Management buying up influence in Albany. Politicians took millions of dollars from real estate developers, and in return, those developers got a sweetened 421A tax abatement and a weakening of needed tenant protections. Unlike Leonard Litwin and a slew of wealthy lobbyists, people like me are not given that kind of special access to our public officials who write our laws and make decisions that affect our everyday lives. Sometimes it feels like no matter how many people we organize in this community and no matter how many thousands of us march in support of the rent laws across the Brooklyn Bridge, we always run up against a brick wall of money and special interest. But I'm here today to tell you that we as New Yorkers won't stand for this anymore. We need a seat at the table. And we're not going to get a seat at the table without the type of reform that makes our vote and our voice as important as those who can write the big checks. The tide is turning. In my neighborhood of Crown Heights in Brooklyn, we just elected a candidate to the New York State Assembly who refused to take a single penny of real estate money to fund her campaign.
Right on. Right on.
And she won by a huge margin.
Yes.
Because voters are fed up with the corruption. We're fed up with landlords and developers buying and dismantling our neighborhoods with the blessing of our elected officials. And we're definitely fed up with the Real Estate Board of New York and the Rent Stabilization Association owning Albany. We don't want to hear any more excuses from those we voted into office as to why they failed to protect the workers of this city. It's time for our lawmakers in Albany to change the way they do business. Attorney General Schneiderman's bill will finally give us a seat at the table. It will help take big money out of politics and put real people back in control of our government, where we deserve to be. I'm so thankful that Attorney General is here today with a real plan to bring the government back to we the people. The choice of our state officials has never been more clear. Either you care about supporting the working families that have voted for you, or you care about lining your pockets with handouts from real estate interests. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus says to his disciples, "No one can serve two masters.
That's right.
For either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." So today, we as tenants stand with Attorney General Eric Schneiderman and send this message to our lawmakers in Albany. You cannot serve both the public interest and your own personal wealth. So make a choice. And know that the 2.5 million rent-regulated tenants of New York City will not forget the choice you've made when your term is up. Mr. Schneiderman, we are with you. We wholeheartedly support you in this effort, and we look forward to the passage and implementation of this bill so that we know that our voices will be heard in Albany. Thank you.
End the corruption. End the corruption. End the corruption. End the corruption now.
End the
End the corruption now. End the corruption now. End the corruption now.
And now, or after one more speaker. I'm very pleased to bring up Darius Gordon now. I spent quite a few decades on the board of Citizen Action of New York, and I'm pleased that he's able to be with us here today. Aaron, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Darius Gordon. I'm the organizer for Citizen Action of New York. First of all, we'd like to thank Attorney General Eric Schneiderman for taking such a bold step in the right direction for New Yorkers. We understand that this is a very important issue. We here at Citizen Action believe that public financing of elections is the very first step in getting corruption out of Albany. We live in a society where our politicians work for the 1% of the very 1%, where they do not have the interests of the people who get them elected into office in the first place, and that is not right.
That's right.
That needs to change right now.
That's right.
When we look at the Fight for 15, where the minimum wage, the living wage should be increased numerous times over the years, has been halted in Albany. That is not right.
That's not right.
We know that when the housing fight for tenants which hardworking families just want a decent place to live, they don't have that because their landlords are squeezing every single nickel and dime out of them. Right. We know that is not right.
That's not right.
So we know that to end that starts with public financing of elections, to get people in office who care about the 99%, who care about the voters in the first place, who get them into office. And we once again want to thank Eric Schneiderman for taking such a tremendous step in the right direction for that. And yeah, thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you all. Thank you all. Now, in closing, let me just make two quick points, and then we can take some questions. First thing, ladies and gentlemen, this is not an anti-business bill. We are for good people in business who want to make money and play by the same set of rules as everyone else. What we've got in New York is not capitalism. What we've got in New York is crony capitalism, where some businesses buy special deals. And I would respectfully submit that when you have a tax code that looks as much like Swiss cheese as the New York State tax code does because of the exemptions and the loopholes carved out by special interests over decades, you can draw no conclusion but the fact that there has to be a recalibration of the system. There has to be comprehensive reform. We have to make this state a good place for public servants who want to do well and for businesses who want to do well and want to do right by their employees. They should not be at a competitive disadvantage because some people get breaks that they can't get. This is about reform for all New Yorkers. We have support in all sectors of the society. When over 90% of the people all over the state see corruption as a problem, that's not limited to one party or another. That's not just limited to one ideology or another. This is a message that everyone in the state is calling for real change, and we want everyone welcome, poor, middle class, rich, Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. This is about taking our government back for everyone.
Yes! Reform now!
And
reform now! Reform now! Reform now! Reform now! Reform now! Mic check.
All right. And now, direct your questions, please, to Matt, and identify yourselves, and we'll do the best we can. Well, this package does provide a lot of limits on what you can do. It also reduces, it's going to reduce the income of a lot of consultants, because if you take the influence of big money out of campaigns and have public financing, you know, it's just not as profitable a business. So it will actually reduce the influence, but this is a bill about reforming the way the legislature and the state government operates. I understand the issue that you're discussing. It does reduce the influence of consultants. It doesn't squarely address this conflict between getting people elected and lobbying them, but that's worthy of consideration also. I'm having trouble hearing. I have to tell you, read the bill, and I would urge my colleagues in government to read the bill. If you can have a really significant salary increase, and we set specific parameters in this bill. We're not talking about a small increase. Have the confidence of the public that you are not serving two masters or seeking to serve two masters. Go to 4-year terms and have a public financing system that enables you to hold your head up and not have people think you're corrupt and you're bought and paid for by your contributors. This is a good deal for members of the legislators, and I've had more than a few tell me they like this structure. This is something that will make our government better and will remove the taint from the overwhelming majority of folks in government, not just legislators, but people who work in state agencies, others who want to do good, but are tarred by the brush of those who it's all too easy for them to break the law. Well, every year, more or less, for the past 5 or 6 years, there have been ethics reform packages introduced and passed in Albany. And every year or so, there's a press conference, they say, we have made fundamental reforms, we have cleaned this up, and then there are more scandals and there's more outrage, and it's clear that they didn't work. I'm done with advocating for incremental reforms. It's time for us to be bold. The people of the state are demanding comprehensive reform. So what was done in last year's budget deal, what was done in this year's budget deal, what was done in the big Ethics Reform Act of 2011, marginal changes. Do they improve things? Yes. Have they solved the problem? Absolutely not. And all you do is have to ask any of the people of the state of New York who see what's going on in Albany. We need comprehensive reform. I've stood at many of those press conferences. I'm done vouching for incremental reforms. Let's see real change.
Be done. Action time.
The governor has supported many of these provisions in the past. We hope that we've sent it on to the legislature now, the actual bill copy, and we look forward to the reaction of our colleagues. Let me note one thing. There are a few weeks left in the legislative session. First of all, a lot of the provisions of this have been scrutinized and proposed by good government groups and examined for a long time. Some of them have been in effect in other states, so we know what the results are. But the notion that there's not time enough left requires me to return to the Bible. I have read Genesis. There is no biblical injunction that the legislature has to shut down shop on the 17th of June. And I think the people of the state of New York would welcome a few extra days of session if they can get the kind of reform that will change this state forever.
And he doesn't have to talk to Cuomo.
I'm not going to get it passed. The people of the state of New York are going to get it passed.
Right.
The activists here are going to get it passed.
The people are speaking now. It's the people are talking.
All we need is for the folks in government to read the bill and open their eyes and ears and talk to their constituents. I travel all around the state of New York all the time. This is not one county, one city, one ideology. This is everyone in the state of New York saying enough is enough. We need a new way to do business that puts the people back in power. I do believe this is going to happen. And again, there are only two paths. You do comprehensive reform now, or you wait until there's some more prosecutions and more scandals and further erosion of public confidence. What do we have to wait for? 95% of the people saying corruption is a problem? Let's do this now.
The people is behind.
Thank you all.